Buenas tardes. Good afternoon. The ocean is the engine room of the global climate system. Maybe you've already heard me say that on other occasions. So it's very good to see so many of you here at this event. Thank you to the Spanish Pavilion for the hospitality. My name is Rémi Parmentier. I have been an ocean advocate for almost 50 years. That's 50. So I've seen the ocean change throughout my adult life, but also I have seen changes in the way we humans value the ocean. So we have a great panel for a stimulating discussion, but before I introduce them, it is my great pleasure to introduce and give the floor to Doña Teresa Ribera, Deputy Prime Minister of Spain. Thank you so much, Teresa, for making the time. I know it was not easy. Very appreciated. Talking of opportunities, the title of this event is Opportunities and Risks for the Ocean and Climate. 2 weeks ago, Maersk, the largest shipping company in the world, announced a huge, unprecedented alternative green fuel investment in Spain for their fleet. So congratulations, Teresa, and congratulations, Spain, and congratulations to the planet and to the ocean. There are also two other issues which are in everyone's minds, which I hope you can address, Teresa. You are one of the champions of the 30 by 30 MPA target. And this is excellent. But what do you tell critics who are asking for a stricter definition of protection? Another question regards seabed mining, an issue which is at the crossroad of ocean and climate. Emmanuel Macron is now calling for a prohibition on deep sea mining. You, Teresa, were the first EU leader to call for a precautionary pause earlier this year. Congratulations. So are you now going to join forces with France, with Germany, and others for the prohibition in the run-up to the third UN Ocean Conference? Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Remy, for these introductory words and for organizing this very nice panel to have a smart discussion on something which is part of life in our planet. The ocean is probably the source of biodiversity, healthy life, but it is also, as you say, a very important engine of the climate system. And it is true that today that we tend to celebrate and to stimulate a much more cross-cutting view on why climate and ocean deserve attention, deserve protection, conservation, restoration, and a better understanding on how each of the systems work, but also how they interrelate. It's a great honor that this Spanish pavilion, can host such an interesting group of people who know so much and who are so committed to the defense of the ocean. Because at the end, we need the voice of the ocean in this COP. This is something that we have been discussing for a long while. This is a dialogue that needed to be established and was established some time ago, and that needs to be improved and deepened. And so this is a great occasion to act firmly against the dynamics that we have been establishing for a long while that were perverse, and introducing limitations and damage that may be difficult to be solved in the time to come. In this point in time, we know that unsustainable extractive exploitation practices and the concerns on to what extent this could go even worse. So your call not only on precautionary measures but also eventually on an interdiction that could be much more tougher is an important call, something that we need to discuss and something that we need to focus in the very short term. Secondly, the impacts of what we do inland, so the urbanization of the coast, the way we manage our resources, our waste, and how it impacts on the health of the ocean. The invasion of species that can move from certain areas to others because of the impacts on temperature and salinization of the water, acidification, the water in the marine areas are part of what we can add to the debate on how climate impacts also in the ocean. And in this binomial relation that we need to understand and to improve in the time to come, we already count on very relevant pieces of information coming from science. So we know sufficient to act. This is not anymore an excuse. We cannot say we did not know. We cannot say we did not have the means. We cannot say it is something to be made by someone else. This is probably one of the main messages that's around this and that is floating in the air. The independent fronts where we need to work dealing with climate and ocean, how we decarbonize our economy and our society, how we can develop the anticipatory management of climate risk, how we can restore and protect the ecosystems, do find in the ocean probably the most difficult space and the latest space where we are acting. So we need to speed up in our reactions. There are opportunities for the protection of the ocean in the climate agenda. And there are some fields of action that combine very well together. You have introduced one example, how maritime transport needs to be transformed, how we need to be accountable for what we do when we transport the goods and the people through the ocean, how we do that. So to avoid to the extent possible, if not at 100%, the impacts of pollution and how this can create additional threats to the ocean. And at the same time, the decarbonization of the transport is also offering new solutions and new opportunities for the health of the ocean. We have been working in Spain for a very long while to develop these agendas, to identify the challenges, the risks, but also to stress the opportunities of this transformation, to be first movers with many others in green shipping, in restoration, in commitments to protect the ocean. We think that counting on a concrete strategy to protect marine areas, but also to pay attention on how we can develop some economic solutions in the ocean without harming what it is sacred, the protection of the biodiversity and the protection of the health of the ocean, is very promising, it's challenging, and needs social understanding on what we do, why we do, and how we pay attention to the concerns being expressed by local communities. The blue carbon, the carbon capture stored through vegetated ocean habitats, has always been something a little bit contested and on some extent from other people promoted. So to what extent we can deal, we can help, we can ensure that this function, this natural function, still works, and to what extent we need to pay attention, not introduce additional elements that could disturb the ecosystems beyond the water. Spain wants to be at the forefront of countries that promote the protection of the ocean, I was saying. We also want to explore what blue economy means. Blue economy is not only fisheries, that's for sure. Blue economy needs to be something sustainable in environmental terms, in social terms. So much more understanding and knowledge needs to be put in place, and much more social discussion needs to be promoted, so to have concrete conclusions around. We are trying to take the lead also within the European and multilateral institutions to enhance and accelerate the protection of biodiversity and the key ecosystems in the ocean space. We think that we need a regional vision, how to protect the different the different seas. When talking about the regional dimension of a piece, of a share of the total ocean dimension, but we also need to have global understandings and global treatments that ensure that the protection of the biodiversity beyond the national jurisdictions takes place. And this has been a challenge. At the beginning it was quite encouraging, and we saw everybody full of energy trying to achieve a deal as soon as possible. And somehow the process has slowed down. But we cannot accept and we cannot permit ourselves additional delays. We need to keep on working in the UNCLOS family on the different pieces of legislation and multilateral agreements that help to preserve and to restore the ocean and its ecosystems. This is why experiences, alliance, working together, sharing views, facilitating a better understanding and a much more loud voice to defend the ocean is important, and this is why we decided to join the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People and the Global Oceans Alliance. We know this because Spain is a hotspot in terms of biodiversity at the EU level, but it has always been a country and a society, communities very much linked to the sea. The ways to explore, to live, and to enjoy the sea. So it is part of the human factor that we need to develop again. The sea is part of our values, the sea is part of what we need to preserve and the identification of our own national communities. The effective marine protection needs to ensure sustainability in the use of marine resources beyond protected areas. Protected areas is important because it is a symbol. It is a way to express how, in concrete terms, we can deal with this whole overwhelming understanding of the marine protection, the ecosystem protection, the biodiversity protection, or the climate system protection. We need to identify pieces of protection that have a human scale. This is why I think that this idea of taking marine protected areas is so important. But of course, this is not the only space that we need to protect. We need to mainstream our biodiversity protection into the different key sectors that have lived from the sea, should be living from the sea, but cannot be the killers of that life in the sea. We are deploying planning, tools, regulation, and control mechanisms to this end for the traditional activities, but also for the new activities and opportunities. There is also, as Remy was saying, some challenges that are creating additional motion in the international agenda. In the framework of the meetings of the Council of the International Seabed Authority, ongoing in Jamaica, Spain has been advocating for a strict compliance with the precautionary principle applied to the eventual exploitation of seabed mineral deposits. This is a very critical moment in this point in time, because the lack of knowledge can mean a step forward that can create unsolvable problems. So we need to pay particular attention on what we allow and in which conditions we allow. Until the moment we do not understand what we are allowing, what for, and within what context of risk, it is difficult to take a decision that can create unsolvable problems, as I say. We have tried to get this position at the EU level, and I think that this is important. EU always works better and is much more effective when acting together. So, this is an issue that deserves a common position. Alliance building with ambitious countries in other regions of the world, such as Chile, New Zealand, Pacific Islands, within the Europe, is absolutely key in the run-up to the next UN conference in 2025. And as of 2023, Spain will be having a voting seat on this convention, and we will use it to ensure protection of marine biodiversity and ecosystems within UNCLOS. We need to preserve in our diplomatic efforts, and we do not forget about the Antarctic. This is so frustrating. The most clear example on where the humankind should be agreeing on a certain type of protection being combined with the commitment of the science that can be provided and can be understood in this region, and still with so many difficulties to go forward. We need a global binding agreement on plastics. This is something that has got some good news in this 2022 year. We need to strengthen scientific research because decisions need to be backed on good science. The lack of knowledge can rail us into difficult decisions or the best decisions, bad decisions that could have side effects that are not desired. This is the decade of ocean science for sustainable development. It began in 2021, and the 2030 agenda for the achievement of the SDGs includes very important goals dealing with the marine areas. Protecting the ocean means protecting our future. Humanity needs to use this decade to evolve from an extractive understanding of prosperity into a nurturing relationship with nature and in particular with ocean. So my last words will be dedicated to Sylvia. I would have loved having Sylvia here, but I understand she could not make it. This is a crazy space to be, and of course Sylvia has done so much in so many crazy spaces that she fully deserves to have her own decisions on where she can be and what are the selected places to be. It is a pity that she could not make the COP this time, but I would like to end these comments quoting her words for my closing. Actions taken in the next 10 years will determine the future of the planet for the next 20,000 years. So the ocean is key, the planet is key, and this decade is absolutely key. Thank you so much.
Yes. So thank you very much, Teresa, for this great presentation. COP27 is called the Implementation COP, and nowadays implementation requires partnerships between governments, civil society, and the private sector. So someone who does that extremely well is Donna Bertarelli, the ocean philanthropist and sportswoman. Because she is a sportswoman, she cannot be here with us because she is in the middle of the Atlantic competing to beat the round the world Jules Verne trophy just now. So she's just sent us a short video message from her boat, Sails of Change. And I invite you to listen carefully to her message.
Minister Rivera, Remy, dear friends, dear colleagues, buenas tardes. As you can see, I'm not in Sharm el-Sheikh. I'm currently preparing to sail around the world, in fact, to sail around Antarctica, the icy heartbeat of our blue planet. Our boat, Sails of Change, carries the 30 by 30 message that many of you share. I'm happy that today's event highlights the links between ocean and climate. It needs repeating. The fate of humanity is tightly linked to the health of the natural world, and more particularly the health of the ocean, which covers, as you all know, 2/3 of the planet and plays a critical role in regulating our climate. The ocean drives the global systems that make Earth habitable for humankind. Since 2015, with the Paris Agreement and the establishment of the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly SDG 14, Life Below Water, we have clear targets and we know what needs to be done. Yet, we continue to pressure the unique ecosystem that is the ocean. At the policy level, we fail to recognize the economic value of conservation and of nature when it's alive versus the economic value of harvesting and extracting these resources. And of course, the importance for a healthy and resilient ocean to mitigate the negative impacts of climate change. We are inefficient at addressing biodiversity loss. We are slow at adopting global ocean regulations with concrete binding measures and enforcement. The insufficient speed and quality of progress regarding biodiversity protection at high-level negotiations is alarming. BBNG, WTO, CAMLAR, and other intergovernmental institutions can and must do more. The world is on the brink of dangerous climate and tipping points. Yet there is hope because the ocean is our best ally. But the ocean can only protect us if we protect it in return. The best available science tells us that to prevent mass extinction of species, extinction of our life support system, we need to set aside at least 30% of land and ocean by 2030. A growing number of governments are committed to the 30-30 target. However, the simple fact is not all marine protected areas deliver conservation, economic, and social benefits. MPAs must be connected, large-scale, highly or fully protected to deliver the expected benefits science shows. But they also need to be well managed, financed, and enforced to become a powerful tool needed to build resilience to threats and protect and restore ecosystems. The Southern Ocean makes up only 10% of the global ocean, but it plays an outsized role in the fight against climate change. Just last week, CAMLAR and its member governments closed the 41st annual meeting, marking the 6th consecutive year with no designation of Southern Ocean MPAs. In contrast to this disappointing news, Member States gave unanimous support to renewed krill fishery management measures while developing a new one. Antarctic krill is a giant conveyor belt constantly moving carbon from the surface down, playing a huge role in supporting biodiversity and helping to fight climate change. So while effective ocean protection must become the norm, not the exception, it is encouraging to see some progress towards sustainable fishery management. Finally, I want to draw your attention to another threat with irreversible consequences for our ocean and climate: deep sea mining. Today, we simply don't know what large-scale industrial mining would mean for ocean ecosystems and biodiversity. That makes it irresponsible and dangerous. Given that climate change is the greatest threat the world has ever faced, given the ocean's importance to mitigate climate change, we need to stop, research, and reflect. Spain, alongside Costa Rica, Ecuador, New Zealand, Samoa, Fiji, Chile, Federal States of Micronesia, Palau, and recently France, Germany, and Panama have called for a moratorium on deep sea mining. Each country that commits to oppose gives us hope that the environmental disaster that can still be avoided. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. From the ocean to COP27. I wish you good luck in our many discussions. Buenas noches.
Well, yes. What a great, inspiring person. I thought she's very busy racing around the world, and I said, can you do a quick and dirty with your telephone? And she did a Hollywood production. I've worked with Donna for a number of years now, and I can tell you that she sails the talk, and her legacy is already impressive. I remember from my years at sea that one must never say good luck to a sailor, but I'm sure that we all mean it, nevertheless. So I said I would introduce our panelists. Now is the time. We are blessed to have with us Hans Otto Partner, the IPCC co-chair of IPCC Working Group 2 co-chair. We have Carl Gustav Lundin, the CEO and Managing Director of Mission Blue, who was noted by Teresa. Marine Le Serre, International Policy Officer of the Ocean and Climate Platform based in Paris. And we also have our friend Sebastian Unger, who was recently appointed a federal commissioner Federal Ocean Commissioner of Germany. So congratulations for the appointment, and thank you for being here, right? So, and of course, some of the staff members of Teresa's team, Teresa Ribera's team, are still here, and of course, if they wish to take the floor, you know, they can do so. So, really, Donna has said it all, so we can go. But talking seriously, I would like to ask maybe Marine Le Serre to give us a little reaction after listening to both Teresa and to Donna.
Thank you so much, Remy. It's a pleasure to be with you here, especially on the Ocean Action Day. I have to start by saying that it's really inspiring to have the two examples of Teresa Ribera and Donna Bertarelli, especially as a young woman, because I can see I'm really representing here for women. So glad to have their examples as well. Yeah, regarding the video, I think Donna clearly explained that the fate of humanity really depends on the ocean health. I believe her exact words, and I wrote them down, is that the ocean drives the global systems that make Earth habitable for humankind. So I would like to pause here for a moment and kind of unpack what this means. I think we all know by now that the ocean is at the crossroads of all major challenges facing humanity today. And so I think it is fundamental to the sustainable world we must build, because ocean ecosystems have healthy ocean ecosystems have the potential to ensure a protected climate, fruitful economies, the energy transition, food security, and obviously decent jobs, livelihood. So I think it's important to note that the sustainable blue economy has the potential to spur inclusive well-being around the world and to effectively meet people's needs. I'm sitting next to Enzo, the partner, so I don't want to talk about the IPCC too much, but of course, the sixth assessment report tells us that the impact of climate change on human societies are growing, with some communities being more vulnerable than others. And the report also tells us that people are part of the solution, that people should be placed at the heart of climate change, of climate action, sorry. Just a quick example of that, including and involving local communities in the design, in the implementation of marine protected areas, because that's one of the topics of the day, is one of the ways to increase the effectiveness of marine protected areas. So very important to continue to include local communities and all people in the discussion. That's actually something that we heard today in the Ocean Action Day event that we had this morning. The mayor of Yoff, a community of Dakar, participated on the panel, and he explained how the schools on the shorelines are impacted. So I think it's really important that we always keep that in mind. I don't want to be too long, but I'm just going to say that last year at COP26 in Glasgow, parties to the Paris Agreement adopted a recurring ocean and climate change dialogue under SEPSTA. So now we have the ocean anchored in international climate discussion, and we recognize the ocean as a powerful source of solution. As Donna said in the video, the ocean is our best ally, so I think we need to capitalize on that and to maximize these solutions. Now that, as Teresa said, we know, we cannot say that we didn't know, so that's my reaction.
Thank you very much, Marine. And of course, it's very important, you know, when we thought who do we need for that panel, it was very important to have you or someone like you, because as I said, I've been an ocean advocate for almost 50 years, and I won't be for another 50 years, obviously, so it's good that you and your generation takes over. So now we're going to shift generation.
Sorry.
And we have the young, nevertheless young in spirit, Hans Otto Portner. 3 years ago, Hans, you produced the IPCC special report on the ocean and cryosphere, which was launched just before the first so-called Blue Cup, which was held in Madrid in 2019. So Now, if it was to be updated now, what changes would you make to the report?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Remy, and thanks a lot for the opportunity to be here and discuss this with you. Let me certainly emphasize that the special report on ocean and cryosphere had a special visibility in the community and also in the policy arena, and was kind of also together with the Ocean Action Day series a starting point for the ocean moving into the formal dialogue for the UNFCCC. So that's a nice success for the community, and I hope the two of us will experience many more such successes in the next decades. Yes. So with respect to what should be said here, I mean, a special report is a special report, and we are at the same time doing our main assessment reports, and we have published the Working Group 2 report. Working Group 1 had a chapter on oceans, Working Group 2 had a chapter on oceans, which essentially represents an update. But I think I would share your wishes in terms of that from time to time the ocean needs this special visibility products to bring it to the attention. Now, what I would be doing and proposing, because the scoping of this report was in a way a compromise, bringing the cryosphere in, bringing the ocean in, and bringing sea level rise in, and in a way a compromise from many proposals received by governments. So we were not so free to design what was in this report. It had to be negotiated with the government, and what certainly would need to be added to such a report is talking about solutions. The solution space is gaining attention. Some of this appears a little bit as an escape route for policymakers, because they look for alternative solutions when they get the feeling that the emissions reduction is not fast enough. And I find that very critical and very dangerous to some extent, the escape solutions that are being proposed. But we can discuss that later. What I would also like to see is to bring land and oceans together. We are treating land as a silo, and we are treating the ocean as a silo. But when we think about the solution options that we have, many of them are very similar, and they are related, and we could be more effective in talking about how these two systems can be brought together in terms of management. And also biodiversity and climate is a new topic in the arena, and IPCC, IPBES have had their first official collaboration last year in a workshop report, and actually that report has had quite an impact on policy discussions as well, although it was not an officially approved sort of special report. The regional aspects, the regional specificities, developing this idea a little bit more in terms of how land and ocean could get together. We could look at things more from the side of the ocean and the land-ocean interaction. It's not really a new topic, but if we bring the complexity of these topics, biodiversity, climate, social issues, justice and equity, poverty eradication, livelihoods, all of this together in one topic, we could do this as we did actually in our main report for the Mediterranean, as where the ocean is the center of the attention. We could do this for the Coral Triangle. We could do this for the Pacific and the islands that are there. We could do this for the Arctic Ocean, the Antarctic, and certainly is a special place, the Atlantic and the Indian Ocean as well. So I think we could develop a holistic view on the planet coming from the blue side of it and what it means for humankind and for a better and a healthy world. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans Soto. Very, very briefly, some people are talking of maybe taking the opportunity of the fifth anniversary of the special report on the ocean and cryosphere to do something that could be called, for example, an ocean and climate stocktake. It would be around the time of COP 29. Do you think it's a good idea, or you have enough to do?
Well, I'm skeptical of that because it is continuing sort of a silo view of the ocean. And that is, if we talk about planetary health, ecosystem health, and human health, I mean, it connects everything that is important to us on this planet. And I think it should certainly be a visible and a strong element in the global stocktake, but we should put the ocean into that global stocktake, and it's an important element of it, and that's what we have been struggling and fighting for quite some time, to make them part of the NDCs, and the NDCs are being analyzed in the global stocktake. So here I would say we need to be holistic.
Excellent. Maybe Lorelei from the Ocean and Climate Platform will think, oh shit, I need to change the name of my organization and call it the Planet and Climate Platform, because she's in that silo. And I agree very much that we need to continue to break the silos. So thank you, Hans Soto, and I'm sure the conversation will continue. Now, Carl Gustav Lundin. So Mission Blue, you and your boss, our friend Sylvia Earle, and like Teresa, you know, I want you to say hello from me, but from all of us to Sylvia. You are alerting and campaigning about deep seabed mining, right? And you've heard Teresa Ribera talking about it, and also Emmanuel Macron last week, calling for a prohibition. So opposition is really taking up. What would you recommend to like-minded governments like Spain or France or Germany and others? And what do you say to the supporters of seabed mining?
Thank you so much, Remy. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm just back from an Indian Ocean expedition with Prince Albert of Monaco Exploration, and we're actually currently in the high seas, other part of the team, in one of those areas that would be affected by seabed mining in the future. We're already discovering tremendous biodiversity values in these areas. So the idea that the bottom of the ocean is dead and there's nothing there, which has sometimes been talked about from the industry side, is of course ludicrous. Some of these areas are incredibly unique and have very, very small ranges of distribution of certain species. So these ecosystems are in fact very interesting and hold countless benefits to us in the future, which we might forgo if we were to go ahead with these mining. So I think we have a false narrative about seabed mining. A lot of people say, well, in order to cope with the green transition, we need these minerals. This is our only hope to be able to meet the demands. And I think that's absolutely not true. So I'd like to tell you why I think it's wrong. The first issue, of course, is that we do already have a lot of minerals available, so we don't necessarily need these very ambitious predictions of how much is needed. So we're exaggerating the needs. And I think if you look at the number of the people that have now stood up against seabed mining, many of them actually are from mining countries that are already involved. The reason they're afraid of this is they think the prices of their minerals will go down so much that their own industry will no longer be profitable. So there is a great competition in this marketplace already. I think no one will make any money on seabed mining. It's something where the only people who are actually going to benefit are the people who are building the machines to destroy nature. It's not something we need right now. The other thing about the narrative, I think, is this idea that we are all in this race where we have to rush into something and we need to skip things, like we don't need environmental impact assessments because it's in the ocean and no one cares. It's ridiculous. Any seabed mining anywhere, of course, needs to have a proper environmental impact assessment. We would never accept such impactful type of industries anywhere without proper assessment. So the rules are not fully in place. we should take the time it needs to put tools in place. And if the conclusion is that the destructive potential of the industry is so great, we shouldn't accept it. We actually need to say, okay, this is enough, we're not going to do this. And I think that is something that the industry obviously doesn't want to hear, but they need to be mature enough to also say, you know, without due process, they have no legitimacy in this case. I think we have a governance issue also that we need to deal with. The International Seabed Authority proclaims itself to be a UN body and to sort of, and somehow regulate this in an international setting. But in fact, it's heavily impacted by the lobby groups of the industry. And it in no way really have the legitimacy to do this. So I think we need to question the whole narrative that the Seabed Authority really should be allowed to make these decisions that could impact many future generations. What we're learning about the deep sea is that many of the biological processes are much, much slower than they would be in more shallow waters or on land. So we're talking about things that are often ecosystems that might be centuries, if not millennia. So what we can destroy in an afternoon might take thousands of years to recover. Now, that really puts it in a completely different light because, you know, we are destroying and making decisions for, you know, 10, 20, 50 generations ahead of us. And it's not reasonable that we do that willy-nilly without a due process. And so I think we need to really get away from the way the industry is thinking. The other thing is to say that this is not something of the future. There is already companies that are starting to bring nodules to the surface at, you know, significant rates. So we can't postpone and as an environmental movement sit idly and wait for this to happen. No, it's happening right now, and we need to take action. We need to mobilize people, and to get to your original question here, countries really need to step up and say, okay, enough is enough. This is not something we need right now. Let's have a moratorium and perhaps in the future a complete ban. Let's not give the industry belief that there's an opportunity here. If they believe they can start making heavy investments, at some point, of course, once you have enough of an industry and enough investment base, it's very, very hard to turn back the clock. Now's their opportunity to take these steps. I think we also need to come back to what Sylvia often says. It's time for us to stop thinking about how we can extract more out of nature and think about how we can put more back into nature. And I think the current rate at which we're extracting and destroying the ocean is really horrifying. And if you think of it, oceans are probably our best natural solution when it comes to climate solutions. Right now, at least the seabed mending hasn't been able to destroy so much of it. But if we add that to all the other impacts, the overfishing, the changing chemistry due to ocean acidification, the warming, and so on, we're really going to tip the systems into a way where instead of being net positive for nature and for climate, they're actually going to be negative. So this would be another nail in that coffin, and I think we really need to be prepared to do that.
Thank you very much, Carl Gustav. It's good to have you. The fight is on. And I was watching Sean Owen, who is in the room. She runs the Deep Sea Conservation Coalition, and I could see her eyes. It was music to her ears, and she was playing with her telephone, so I suppose she was tweeting what you were saying. And so watch Twitter when we finish. And I expect that if we have time for Q&As, I would be surprised if Sean did not try to take the floor. But I want to invite now Sebastian Unger, Germany's Federal Ocean Commissioner. That's a new job, right? It did not exist. You're the first one, right? So congratulations. Congratulations for the appointment. Germany, I think Germany already raised questions, concerns about what's happening in Kingston at the International Seabed Authority with seabed mining. And I think Germany, you'll tell us, but has expressed already support recently, just a few days ago, for a precautionary pause, to use the expression that Teresa and others are using, the Chileans, for example. So after Macron's call for a prohibition last week, where does Germany stand?
Yeah. Thank you, Remy, and thanks for everyone coming together here today. And I think we are really standing at a very crucial point with regard to ocean policy and the future of our common ocean. And we can see this here at COP27. We can see this at the BBNJ negotiations. We can see this in the marine elements of the Global Biodiversity Framework, in the CBD. And we see a lot of challenges there. I mean, it's not easy to be successful there, but there are great opportunities in there. We also see, and this is what you were alluding to, Remy, is that already by July next year, we can see the first official application for commercial deep seabed mining being submitted to the International Seabed Authority. We heard, and Teresa said this also very clearly, there's limited knowledge about the deep ocean. We are starting to know more and more, but the effects from deep seabed mining, for example, are not very well understood yet. And we also don't quite know what indirect effects this might even have on the climate regulatory system. We as contracting parties have to be really careful that we're not sleepwalking into deep seabed mining, and that we are adding yet another layer of pressure on an ocean that is already in a crisis. So against this general background, the German government, and you said this, Remy, has announced 2 weeks ago at the International Seabed Authority that until further notice it will not support any deep seabed mining. We are not going to sponsor or to support any application for a work of plan for deep seabed mining until we have a better understanding of the ocean in general. We really want to understand what is out there in terms of species, ecosystem functions, regulatory functions, and also the risk of deep seabed mining. But a crucial fact is also that we need to make sure that there are no harmful effects of possible deep seabed mining on the deep ocean. So this is why Germany is calling, like others, and you said this before, there's a growing group of countries for a precautionary pause in deep seabed mining. And we were also very glad to hear the strong statement by Macron, who has also now with France joined this alliance of states. And I think we can perhaps call this alliance an alliance of reason coming together to really put a brake on this possibly devastating activity. But let me also put this into a broader context. We were mentioning the COP here, the COP15, BBNJ, and I think we really have to see that this biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction comes with specific objectives, and with deep seabed mining we have to be careful that we are not jeopardizing the objectives that we have there with regard to conservation, with regard to sustainable use, because we're talking about the same areas. When we talk about the Global Biodiversity Framework, and I really liked to see Donna Bertarelli and also Teresa, of course, calling so strongly for the 30 by 30 goal. Again, we are talking about one ocean. We believe it's really important that we're not separating out different jurisdictional zones when we talk about the 30 by 30 goal. But this means also we have quite a huge opportunity now to create a governance framework with BBNJ, with a precautionary pause, with a global biodiversity framework that really can bring together the different pieces of the jigsaw. I think Donna said this also nicely. 30 by 30 is not about number crunching. It's about representative networks, it's about coherence, it's about good management. And this requires governance systems that integrate and really work together with each other. That's a challenge, but it's feasible, and we are now at the phase where we have to build this comprehensive governance system. So with that, I perhaps close, and I'm really excited to be here. I'm looking forward to hopefully some continued discussions with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sébastien. And it's great to have Germany on board. I expect that you and Germany will receive a lot of praise now from everybody in the room and everybody at the COP who also believe, all those who believe that deep sea mining is a dangerous path for both the ocean and the climate. Marine, I'll ask you to be brief, but you have, you've heard Teresa Ribera sharing her views on marine protected areas and ocean protection. Very briefly, please, can you give a reaction and your take on the nature and role of marine protected areas?
Sure, thank you, Remy, for your question. Regarding marine protected areas, there are 3 points that I would like to make. The first one is that marine protected areas have the potential to deliver climate benefits. This is the conclusion actually of a scientific review that we conducted at the Ocean and Climate Platform together with the CNRS, and that was recently published in One Earth. Let me share with you a few findings. So we know now that MPAs have a strong positive effect on carbon pools, including, for example, mangroves or seagrass. And what this means is that MPAs basically can help achieve mitigation objectives in line with the Paris Agreement. Of course, as a complement to GHG emissions reductions, don't get me wrong. Another point is that MPAs can increase biodiversity, coastal protection, food security, and promote alternative livelihoods, and that as such, MPAs have also the potential to deliver on climate adaptation objectives. Of course, and Donna mentioned it also in the video, a wide range of criteria are at work to ensure that MPAs deliver effectively on these climate objectives. For example, benefits are higher in fully or highly protected areas. My second point is that MPAs should be further included in national climate strategies, and we also mentioned it earlier in the discussion. I don't know actually if you remember, Remy, but last year at COP we published an analysis of NDCs, and well, I had to read basically all new and updated NDCs, and I remember that there is a great number of countries that included MPAs in their indices, but there's a lot more that can be done. We can be more specific, give more information, and further include also MPAs in all the mitigation sections of the NDCs. So scaling up basically MPAs and NDCs. My last point is that MPAs can also help to build synergies between climate and biodiversity action. Because as we said, the 30 by 30, the objective of having 30% of land and sea protected by 2030 is also an opportunity to build bridges between the two different regimes, the two different actions. And as you often say, Remy, it's time to break the silos. So if we need to keep the 1 degree target of the Paris Agreement within reach, we need healthy ecosystems. And conversely, stopping the decline of biodiversity will not be possible if we don't mitigate climate impacts quickly. So we need to urgently prioritize climate smart and biodiversity positive action, and of course MPAs are a case in point for that. They have the ability to contribute to both climate mitigation, climate action, deliver on biodiversity conservation objectives, and deliver a wide range of socio-economic benefits for people. This is to me the very definition of the win-win situation, and we need, if we want to rise to the challenge, to really prioritize that kind of action.
Thank you very much, Marine. That was marine protection by Marine. That's very cool. I'm looking at my watch, and something extraordinary has happened. According to my notes, it says 2 o'clock. We start the interactive session with the audience, and it's 2 o'clock according to my watch. So it means you've been very, very, very good. Congratulations. And so you know, if anyone wishes to make a comment or take the floor, I I see some hands being raised. With your permission, maybe we start with Sean Owen, who runs the Deep Sea Conservation Coalition. So she's very much in the thick of the battle to stop deep sea mining, and I see she was, you know, of course she takes the floor. And I've seen the rest of you, and but first Sean.
Super, thank you, Remy, and thank you to all of the panel for speaking today. Yes, I'm glad you pointed out that I was on my phone as Carl Gustav was speaking, and indeed I was sending a tweet, so I hope you like the photo that I've accompanied it with. I wanted to thank you for your powerful words on the importance of protecting the deep ocean and the call for a moratorium on deep seabed mining, which is, you know, what we've heard a few times actually today and just in the last hour. My question is actually for you, Sebastian. And thank you also to Germany for standing up and joining the Alliance of Reason. I think that's a fantastic title for the group of like-minded countries that is very much coming together now, using different language, precautionary pause, moratorium, ban from President Macron last week, but all with the same intent of halting this rush to mine the deep seabed. My question to you is, given where the authority sits for this, the International Seabed Authority is really where this decision actually needs to land. And my question to you is, what do you see needing to happen in the next 6 to 12 months in that context to realize this goal?
Go ahead, Sebastian.
Yes, thanks a lot, Sean. And first of all, thanks a lot for your great work and on this issue. I think it really has helped so much also to raise the cause for this topic we were discussing. And your question is really, really important. You know, we are looking at this 2-year rule that I don't know if for those who are not so familiar with the whole discussion, there might be the risk that actually in July next year there might be already a discussion about whether the ISA need to approve a application for a plan of work, and we really have to think about what will happen then. And from our point of view, and that's sort of our legal position here, there's a strong opportunity that the parties can really steer the process. So it's up to the parties to decide whether this activity can go ahead or not. There are different interpretations among parties how this really should take place, but I think this really has to be worked out how this can function in the council. So that's really a priority. And our government, given that deep seabed mining is a possibility in the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, we believe that as a safety net, although we are calling for this precautionary pause until further notice, this is really the wording that we have worked on quite a while in our government. Even though we're calling for that, we think as a safety net it's important to work really on the strongest possible regulation that meets certain requirements. And one of the requirements is that it really is waterproof in terms of avoiding serious environmental harm to the environment, that it shifts the burden of proof also from the environmental regulator to the applicant. It really needs to be built on good governance principles like transparency, accountability, etc. And as a fourth point, we really have to also ensure compliance with the system. And we know that there's a long way to go in this institution, and I think Carl Gustav also said this very, very clearly. So I think these are really the priorities we have to go further. And it's really, I mean, Germany holds exploration contracts, and from our side we have said that Germany as a country will not support any application for mining contracts, and we really invite other countries to follow who hold such exploration contracts to follow this example, because this could be a very concrete way to implement a precautionary pause. So that's really needed.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. Does Carl or Hans Otto or Marine want to add something in response to the question from Sean? Carl Gustav, I see you want.
I think it would at this point also be helpful to do a bit more of a review of the International Seabed Authority and how it actually makes decisions. I mean, they've sort of been in many ways working in the dark, and I think a lot of governments are not aware of the fact that they have the self-claimed right to manage things. And I think the governance structure, as I said before, needs to be seriously reconsidered and positioned differently. And we right now have a situation where the assumption is that you will always go ahead and mine. Well, that I think is an incorrect assumption. So we should bake this into the biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction discussions as well. I'm not saying that we should add a new chapter into that, but what I'm saying is we need to consider that in the framework of BBNJ, and with the large commitment to marine protection 30 by 30 that a number of countries have made, obviously that also includes the high seas, and that would then put large parts of the high seas outside of any type of mining operation. And right now that is not sort of figured into the process. I think that would be another important step. So do the review, take your time to do that properly, invite broader sector of society, including civil society, to be part of that review, and then at the same time work on the BBNJ protection measures. And a number of these areas that are proposed for seabed mining, like the crusts of seamounts, for example, are incredibly rich in biodiversity and often highly unique. I mean, many of the seamounts will have as much as 80% endemism within just a matter of 100 miles. So with that type of situation, we really need to know what it is we're destroying before we let anyone go ahead and do it. Yeah.
Thank you. And obviously, I cannot tweet as I'm facilitating, but if I could, I would say Carl Gustav Lundin calls for transparency. It's a word you did not use, but I think it summarizes well. Hans Otto.
Yeah, just to help this debate, certainly you were asking about what we would do with respect to the next special report on ocean. I would say there's a clear need for a deep sea chapter. I should have mentioned that earlier with respect to its special properties, and also covering the different ocean regions, and then that would help to stimulate the research that is needed in order to make an environmental impact assessment that is coming with high confidence of what can be done or cannot be done.
Marine, you're going to have to deal with this issue for many years because it's not going to go away even if there is a moratorium or whatever we call it. So any thought, or you think this is enough and we move to the next?
I can only second everything what has already been said. I think for the International Seabed Authority, what is also important as representative of non-state actors at the platform, we're a network of 100 organizations. It's important also to keep the link and the discussion open between governments and civil society representatives. So that's the only thing I want to add there.
Okay, so Paola, who's taking the notes of this meeting, she's writing now. Everybody responded to DSMT. You know why I call her DSMT? It's because Sean's real name is Deep Sea Mining Terminator. So, sir, and then I see Lorelei, but sir. And please introduce yourself for. And I'm asking that to all the speakers. Please introduce yourself.
Bonjour, Remy. John Vermeer from the Gallifrey Foundation.
Oh, yes.
So, the clock is ticking. We don't have much time. So, how do we stop this? I think I have two questions for you. One is, Germany is a contracting state. You're taking the lead. We need that. One of the many flaws of the ISA is not many states actually show up. So what is the potential that we can get a coalition of states that never go there? They're signatories, they have the right, they should come there and make their voices heard. It's this year, 2023 is the only time to do it? That's the first question. The second is, as we've looked at deep sea mining over the years, we've concentrated on the issue of biodiversity. Is this not the time to leverage climate, and particularly we think of the 40 centimeters of sediment that are at the bottom of the ocean? We've learned from the report last year the impact of trawling, which is more than the greenhouse gases of Germany. Those are the two points that I want to ask the panel. How do we leverage that and stop this? Because time is ticking. Thank you.
So, who wants to respond first?
I will give a quick start. And it was so noisy that I hope I really got all. The first question I had some difficulties, even though you were standing next to me. But I got that you were asking how can we mobilize other states to come up. I mean, that's a $1 million question on the first place. I mean, the problem we had was with Corona, with the Corona crisis, that a lot took place virtually and in different formats. So it's good on the first hand that states can come back again. But you're right, not many states come. And one of the big issues of the ISA, and it's difficult to go into detail here, is but that we have not every country counts the same there. I mean, there are different chambers. You have the Legal and Technical Commission, you have the Council, which has a chambered voting system, etc. So there are a couple of countries that are really key in the further process to have a stronger position with regard to the precautionary pause. So that's I think that's really important. But then on the other hand, it's the mineral resources are the common heritage of mankind and humankind. And there's the issue: how do we get this also not only global but also intergenerational perspective much better integrated? That's a governance challenge we cannot solve within 6 or 10 months. So this requires time. This really requires also the pause to really think about it. What does this mean in the 2020s really, and not from the 1960s or 80s where this idea came from? So with that, I hand over for the other questions.
Hans Soto, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the issue of carbon storage in sediments is an issue on land, but it's a relatively new issue emphasized for the ocean, and it's probably the largest carbon store in the ocean, and the benthic organisms that have not been in the focus of research so much in that context are an important part of this process, and protecting the existing carbon stores everywhere, I think should be a predominant task in order to minimize the impacts of ecosystem destruction on climate change. These are really the quick fixes that we can do, where ecosystems can help in terms of cutting existing emissions down, and benthic trawling and other sediment-bound activities would be important in this context. What also is important on the long term, when we think about what ecosystems can contribute to climate stabilization after we have, or in parallel to when we have finally succeeded to cut back emissions, is a strengthening, and we should start right away with that, strengthening the natural pathways of carbon transport and building the stocks of animals in the ocean, including going beyond the typical focus on the biological carbon pump being involving phytoplankton and then zooplankton, and not thinking beyond. We need standing fish stocks, we need standing stocks of mammals in the ocean that help redistributing the nutrients and fertilize the ocean. So strengthening the natural pathways of carbon storage is a very important perspective, I think, for the long-term climate stabilization, both on land and in the ocean. And I'm saying that as we are seeing that with climate change, species are moving, ecosystems are changing in their composition, biogeographies are changing, tropical habitat is getting lost progressively with continued continued warming, and I'm saying that again for land and ocean. And we are seeing that polar species are being pushed to the brink of extinction, and this will interfere with this process. So I think all of this calls for a strong push for general societal mobilization, and the dimension of this mobilization has to increase the longer we wait with ambitious emissions reduction in order to keep global warming to a limit. And I'm pleased to see that this COP has had today the first Biodiversity Day, opened by the presidency, supported by the presence of high-level policymakers, including John Kerry, who emphasized the link between biodiversity and climate. So it has arrived in the policy arena, and I would just like to see that we overcome the not enough in terms of action very soon. Thank you.
That's very good, thank you. And indeed, we're going to continue that conversation during this COP, but also in Montreal in just a few weeks. It's very interesting to see that now not only the ocean, I mean, we've worked together for a number of years to make sure the ocean is in the climate COP, but now also this issue of seabed mining that was nowhere in Glasgow, really. So I see Marine nodding, but your boss has asked for the floor, and so I don't want to put you in trouble. And Lorelei Picourt, who runs the Ocean and Climate Platform, soon to be the Planet and
Everything in the World
platform. So you'll have a bigger thing.
Portfolio.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Remy. Hi, everyone. First thing, happy Ocean Action Day. Thank you. This is Ocean Action Day. Now, I have a very simple question, because we talk about breaking down the silos, and we talk about, building bridges with DSM and other issues, and we've heard a lot throughout the COP that there will be no Paris without Montreal. Of course, that's true, and one of the linkages here are those famous marine protected areas. However, we know that 30 by 30 is the low-hanging fruit of the negotiation for COP15. It might not look at the ocean so much as it will look at land. We know that there are MPAs in the NDCs, but they're mostly for adaptation. What about the strategies that will be applied for biodiversity? So all of this is a little bit mixed up, and my question to you, all experts, including my dear Marine, obviously, how do you break down the silo concretely? How do you make sure that countries are accountable for the great announcement that they make in those COPs, and that it makes sense afterwards within the text and the procedures of these conventions that are Rio conventions and that were, created to work with one another and are really not doing so?
So that's a big question. I see Carl is moving his pen, so you start. And try to speak up, because indeed it's very noisy. We talk of underwater pollution, but there is also noise pollution.
I think he's not on his mic.
It's not working?
No.
So maybe why don't you come in the interest of time? Does someone, while he's...
Sorry about
is
that.
this working now?
Yeah, this is good. So, I think one of the biggest problem we have, of course, is that within governments, there are different departments and they have different, sometimes parties leading different things, and that happens in many countries. So they are actually not speaking with one voice. Now, how do we get accountability in a system like that, and transparency, Remy's word? Well, I think it's down to taking track and actually having commitment trackers, showing that this was a commitment, the country has failed to honor its commitment, and hold the responsible people accountable. I think that's at the heart of what we need to do in all of these situations.
Okay.
And that we're, as a movement, I think, too meek many times. We sort of let them get away with murder. We need to turn around and say, you're accountable to the decisions you've made, and you need to honor these commitments.
The MPA tracker, that's a good idea. We'll talk about that later. Sebastian.
Yeah, and Yeah, thanks for this question also from my side. I think we have to work at different levels. So one, of course, is the national level. What we're now going to do in Germany is we're creating a coordination across the different ministries so that we really try to overcome the silo that is, of course, very dominant. But then at the international level, I think it's key that we use, for example, BBNJ. For me personally, that's really a key success criteria, that it will move the sort of global cooperation to a level where we can really have a cooperation and coordination institutionally built into this agreement. And I think there's some hope that it's going this direction, but it can sort of, there's strong, as you might know, strong tendency to keep status quo or to go beyond. And the same with deep sea bed mining. I haven't mentioned that, but the discussion on regional environmental management plans is also strong potential that from that side there's an anchor point in the mineral regime for cooperation between the mineral resource regime and BBNJ. So we have to really build on these integration points very effectively.
Thank you very much. I see Hans Soto.
Yeah, thank you very much. This reminds me of a recent decision by the UN General Assembly which has decided that humans should have a right to a healthy environment. And the ocean environment is part of the environment, and its controlling functions in a more planetary view, its regulatory functions is essential for maintaining life on this planet. So I think there may be a legal basis, and there may be a basis for litigations also for intergenerational justice and rights. And I think this should be developed further. These instruments are essential because there will always be some laggards, some people who put their short-term economic interests first at the country level, and I think we need a mechanism how to streamline these developments in a useful direction.
Maybe we can summarize that no ocean wealth without ocean health. Marine, you wanted to add something, no?
Sure. I already talked about climate smart and biodiversity positive action. Just to share maybe a more of a governance perspective as a policy nerd that I am. There's also different areas where we can create synergies between the CBD and the UNFCCC Forum. Of course, there's science. I know that there's already had a workshop between IPCC and IPBS. There's also more connection that we can do regarding science. There's also opportunities on the policy side. For example, we could also coordinate the NDC on the climate convention and trying to see how we can make them work with the NBSAPs that are the biodiversity counterpart of NDC. So trying to align that, trying to make also the COPs work together on an action perspective, on the mobilization perspective. We could also trying to create a more strengthened agenda between the GCA for the climate mobilization and the nature agenda that is for the moment a bit weaker than the climate counterpart. So trying to see how the two could unite forces, and the last one is also finance. We could also see in the portfolios how we can have criteria for both biodiversity and climate, how the different also financial mechanisms could work together, trying to have common and joint agendas. So to conclude, I would just want to say that the post-2020 global biodiversity framework that you mentioned, Sebastian, is intended as an umbrella framework. There's also a target on climate change, and there's the ocean that is supposed to be mainstream in the framework. So trying to push for ocean, climate, and biodiversity interaction in this framework will be extremely important to move forward, not only at COP15 now, but also in the implementation phase and the negotiations that we'll have for the CBD work program and all the different framework of the CBD to trying to create the bridges.
Thank you very much, Marine. In the film, you heard Donna Bertarelli say ocean protection should be the norm rather than the exception. And maybe you're intrigued by what she means, and because I have some credit into that sentence, and developing that concept of making ocean protection the norm rather than the exception. And I was able to do it thanks to support from Donna Bertarelli and the Tara Foundation and MedPan. I would invite you, if you're intrigued by that sentence from Donna Bertarelli, I would encourage you to read that paper, which was published earlier this year, which I wrote, and it's called From Blue Food for Thought to Blue Food for Action. And there is a thing called Google, right? You've heard of it, right? So if you type From Blue Food for Thought to Blue Food for Action, it should just come up and you read it, and I'm happy to receive your feedback. So I think we're concluding with this. I see the organizers telling me that it's time to go. Unless anybody else would like to take the floor, or any of the panelists would like to have a or the final word. Yes, I see Hans Hoto and Carl. Yes, very brief, because I see Eva. You go.
Yeah, my compliments to the Spanish government and the Spanish court system for having us here, and it's also my compliments for, I think, a legal event that I think should lead the way, where the Spanish court, I don't know which it was, gave the right to exist to an ecosystem, to a natural environment. And I think this is the next step forward for us, to accept the right of nature to exist by itself without always thinking about human interests. And this is, I think, should be the next part of our discussion.
Well, there are some executives of the Biodiversity Foundation of the Spanish ministry here. It's called the Fundación Biodiversidad, and I'm sure they're very grateful for your words, and that's what they're doing every day. Carl.
No, just to say, I think without ocean health, we really won't have ocean wealth, as you said. I think that's very well put, and we need to get back to an idea that we're all dependent on the ocean, because we very much do.
So, if you want to pursue this conversation about deep sea mining, in an hour and a half, at 5 o'clock in the Chile pavilion, at 5 o'clock, right? There is another event which is fully dedicated to deep sea mining, hosted by the Chileans. And if you have not had enough of my French accent, I'm warning you that I'll facilitate it as well. And tomorrow at 3 o'clock in the Pacific Moano Pavilion, there is another special event about deep sea mining, but I won't be there. And I would like to thank you, Spanish Pavilion and Fundación Biodiversidad. I want to thank Eva and Sergio, and also my colleague Paula Castillo, who's here supporting my work at the COP, and without her I could not cope with the pressure. So thank you very much, Paola. And stay safe and keep the ocean safe.
And go to COP15.